said that it's time for Telstra to face the music, no backward step from the government, their trust with the public stands in peril. Should the CEO consider her position?
I think the CEO got asked that question earlier today and said this is a matter for the investigation. We are on day 3 of the outage. I was advised between the Telstra press conference and standing before you now that this issue has been formally resolved. ACMA is on day 3 of its investigation. I think she said that the board will contemplate that as part of its internal processes. We would expect Telstra to comply fully and transparently with the investigation that ACMA will undertake. Their 000 custodian will also be conducting a post-incident review, and I will wait for those facts and recommendations to come in before I consider my position.
Putting yourself in Telstra customers' shoes, is it fair that they have to call up the telco, potentially spend an hour on the phone, something that some Australians already dread, to make a complaint to maybe get some compensation? Why should small businesses be put out even more?
Yeah, Oscar, I would expect that Telstra provides an expedited triage process for its customers to deal with compensation here. That's only fair.
On numerous occasions, but specifically 2 years ago, the government-run Cyber and Infrastructure Security Centre actually alerted critical infrastructure operators that there was quite a reliance in their systems on GPS and timing systems. Could more have been done to force those infrastructure holders like telcos to make sure that there were redundancies in their system? Maybe this is a question for ACMA as well, about actually addressing what has clearly been an area of potential weakness identified for many years by government authorities.
Well, I would say, as you would well know, Telstra is captured by security critical infrastructure legislation, which means it has to observe higher standards and more rigorous processes when it comes to discharging their duties. That is a right and good thing. Adam, did you want to elaborate on any technical?
I'll just make one point, Minister. One of the things that we're looking at under our investigation is that Telstra need to ensure that they do everything they possibly can to make sure that people can get through to 000. That includes maintaining their network. So one of the questions we will inevitably look at and ask them about is how they configure their network, which will inevitably involve us asking questions around the equipment that they've got in the network.
Have you sought briefings from South Australian Police, the government in South Australia, or Telstra about a death that has been potentially linked to this outage?
So you understand the SSA police investigation is ongoing, and Telstra cooperated with them overnight, and you heard in their Telstra press conference that they provided a technical update at what their investigations had heard at their end at this stage. We are all working collaboratively together. We await the SA Police investigation to run its course, but there is currently no evidence that there is any causative link between the Telstra outage and this very sad outcome.
Has that been conveyed to you in briefings you've had directly with those bodies?
Yes.
Minister, former Senator Darren Hinch has passed away today. One of the nation's most respected broadcasters. As Communications Minister, can you reflect on his career? Would you hope the government maybe holds a state funeral for Darren Hinch?
Well, I offer my condolences to all of those who loved Darren Hinch. As the Communications Minister, obviously, to me, he's known best as a journalist, a renowned journalist. He was an author, lately a federal senator. I think he will be remembered as an icon of the media. I think that's fair to say, and by all those fondly whom he fought and advocated for. I'll leave those questions to the Prime Minister.
Federal government agencies and academics warned Telstra about this glitch. Do you think that this outage could have been avoided?
I will wait for the facts and recommendations to come in from the ACMA investigation. Adam, I don't know if you want to speak to that further, and the 000 custodian post-outage review, in order to make any determinations about further policy. But I would make the point, we have done a lot as a government since what happened in September happened. We legislated the 000 custodian. We increased the fines to $30 million. We now have another piece of legislation before the Parliament right now, which would give the Minister new powers to mandate mobile minimum standards across the country. Now, I'm disappointed to say that we sought to work with the Coalition on that before introducing it to Parliament. They were not collaborative. They did not offer any suggestions. They did not offer any improvements to that bill. They've been speaking against it in the House. They have not given me any indication that they intend to support it. But that bill before the House right now would give the Minister new powers to mandate minimum standards. domestically and terrestrially, not just on satellites. And I would urge the opposition to collaborate with us and to get that bill passed.
Make 2 points in relation to that. Under some of the new powers that the Minister referred to, Telstra has an obligation to provide 45 days after a major outage like this a report which explains very, very clearly why it happened and what the steps that they have taken to make sure it won't happen again. They have to provide that report to the SEMA and also to the custodian. And the second thing I'd add is, in our investigation, we will of course ask all of these questions, and then the ultimate conclusions of our investigation will be made public.
Minister, what did you make of Ms. Braden's apology?
It was the right thing to do.
I know you were asked about this on Wednesday, but Michael Ackland has now said there were potentially some issues with the CAMPON system. There's supposed to be this industry campaign to make people aware if they're on an older device that might not be capable of doing this CAMPON to another network to call 000. Where is that campaign at? Could we see it shortly? Or do you think that this now needs to be fast-tracked and rolled out to make sure that that isn't a gap in the system?
We have already been working with the Telecommunications Alliance on that particular campaign and with the 3 telcos, obviously. There is nothing in what we know so far about this outage that would suggest that had that campaign already been on foot, it would have made any difference to the outcomes here. But of course, we will continue that work. Caitlin.
We've heard some pretty scathing remarks about big tech companies at the Royal Commission today about how they've engaged, but also what they do to tackle anti-Semitism. Have you been satisfied as Communication Minister with how these platforms have engaged with the Royal Commission? And then also there was a suggestion or questions today about whether X should be banned in Australia. Do you think that the platform X has lost its social licence here?
I can't speak to the experiences of the Royal Commission because I stand over here as the Communications Minister. I can say, as the Communications Minister, the efforts from social media platforms have been highly patchy when it comes to upholding and obeying Australian laws. That's why we're so keen to legislate the digital duty of care in the second half of this Parliament.
One of the concerns raised is that a lot of these platforms don't have moderators based in Australia. They don't have a corporate presence. Would you urge these platforms to establish that in Australia?
I would urge social media platforms, if they want to make profits from Australian companies, if they want to transact their business on Australian shores, then they should uphold Australian laws.
Given all the changes that were implemented after Optus, are telcos still too slow in informing the federal government about the outage in the first place? And given that the Telstra CEO this morning, she was dodging questions about whether executives should still get bonuses, is that a fair thing for executives to still be in line for bonuses when small businesses and other customers need to be compensated?
I think we can all agree that telcos need to lift their game, and I want to reassure Australians that we will hold Telstra's feet to the fire so they feel your pain. What has gone on here is not good enough, and Telstra has committed to cooperating fully with the government, with ACMA, in our investigations. Now, obviously the result of the ACMA investigation ultimately becomes a question of penalties, so we need the facts and the recommendations to play out before we get to that.
Can I just add one thing to what the ma'am? Thank you. Just to your question, that question about did they meet their obligations to tell people in a timely manner what was going on, that is one of the things that we will look at in our investigation.
Telstra have said that they started to identify this issue at around 4:20 a.m. Sydney time, that it was something that kind of grew in scale, and that it only, quote, hit a certain threshold at about 7 a.m, which was when your office, Minister, was contacted. It's when Vicky was told. It's when Michael Ackland was told. That's more than 2.5 hours. Is that something that you think is satisfactory, particularly given, for example, media were being given a statement about this issue some half hour before your office was informed?
That's what they're required to do under the law. They have obligations under the law, and we have bolstered those obligations since September. That's one of the things that has been improved in this outage compared to September. Adam, did you want to speak to the timing?
Look, I just wanted to reiterate that it's something that we will look at, and that's a very, very good question. What was the most appropriate point that they should have told their customers, the public, and key stakeholders what was going on.
I wanted to ask about the gambling legislation. As part of that, as part of the opt-out feature, you said that you want people to be able to get clear, accessible and functional mechanisms to opt out. What does that look like from your perspective when someone goes on an app? Are you expecting that they would get notified straight away to be able to opt out, or sort of how deep into the settings do you expect people would have to go, such as on the SBS On Demand app, to need to opt out of wagering advertising?
Well, that's exactly what I've said previously and what I'll say again today. That to me looks like the technology that SBS On Demand uses on their app. If you've done it yourself, I've done it, it's easy to navigate. SBS has generously offered to share that technology with other apps and services that will require it. I think that's very good of one of our national public broadcasters to offer that. It shows that it is possible, and that's what we expect companies to deliver by 1 January.
Telstra's nationwide outage left Australians unable to make 000 calls, stranded on trains, and businesses counting the cost. Yet in question time, Communications Minister Anika Wells was playing defence. She said the CEO's position is a matter for the investigation and that customers should get an expedited triage process for compensation. Translation: good luck on the phone. Wells pointed to new laws and upcoming inquiries, but the tough questions kept coming about the delay notifying her office, ignored warnings on GPS timing weaknesses, and a potential linked death in South Australia. She offered condolences on Darren Hinch's passing, then urged the coalition to support more legislation. Same old story: big telco failure, tough talk about holding their feet to the fire, while everyday Aussies wear the pain.